won the Life Membership Award. They were terrific dinners. They were in good company. We also saw David Irving from Whittier, who is one of the representatives that we appoint to the Whittier board, also honored as a Life member. So they are joining some distinguished ranks as far as that goes. And that wraps up my chairman's comments. Oral communications from the public? Not seeing any. All right. The consent agenda. I'll read the donations aloud. This is under item G on the consent agenda, or sorry, item G total. 37 Chromebooks valued at $10,915 donated by the Salisbury Elementary School PTA to be used in Salisbury Elementary School classrooms. 8 iPads valued at $2,392 donated by the Salisbury Elementary School PTA to be used by students in the Salisbury Elementary School kindergarten classrooms. A refund in the amount of $920 from the purchase of Read Naturally Live licenses. Enough licenses remain from last year to cover students. The refund check will be used towards purchasing Read Naturally Live licenses in 2019. A check in the amount of $5,000 from the Richard Eaton Foundation to be used to fund the Student Athlete Academic Center. And that is it. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, please?
Can we place a hold on things first?
Absolutely.
I would like to place a hold on letter E, the Moody's Investors Service Credit,
Absolutely.
and then I'll make a motion.
So, okay, and I'm going to suggest that we'll just handle that during the Finance Subcommittee section at the end of the meeting. Yes.
I just wanted to ask a question about the donation, the $5,000 donation from the Richard Eaton Foundation. Where is the Student Athletic Academic Center?
So that is
Can you
here after school. Students have the opportunity to come down, often between the end of school and when they start practice. And there are, currently 2 staff that we have, teachers who will work with students, extra help, but basically an opportunity to come here and do work in a constructive, productive environment rather than floating around waiting for practice.
Is that every day?
I want to say 4 days. I want to say Monday through Thursday.
Monday through Thursday.
But it's not just 1 day a week. I believe it's Monday through Thursday.
Okay, thank
An
you.
hour and a half.
Linda?
I was just wondering about the Chromebooks from Salisbury Elementary. Are those leased or they just buy them outright?
I was going to say I'm almost positive. I know the Pine Grove PTA approved 2 leases for carts last night. I believe Salisbury did the same. Other TEF donations have all been leases because we've been suggesting that leases are the way to go. Yeah.
Can I get a second?
Can I make one clarification just to make sure that everyone saw for the middle school trip, the paper came to you late, but I just want to note that was our miss getting it to you, just the date on there. Mr. McRae did have this back in October to me, and I actually signed it on the date of the October meeting, so I just want to make sure for the record that that was not the middle school's fault. That was our miss in getting it to you. And also to say, this is the correct way to do this form. So it's a 2-part form. They did part 1, and now the way we reworked this. So they're now looking for planning approval, and then they'll come back once all the details to get final approval before the trip goes. So this is basically a redo of the trip.
I'll second it.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor of approving the consent agenda? All right. That's unanimous? Yes. Yep. All right. Student advisory report, please, Olivia.
Homecoming this year will be held from Monday, November 12th to Wednesday, November 21st. Student Council has been planning the events and activities since the start of the school year, and we're really excited to continue this Triton tradition. Dress-up days will take place all week, with students earning participation points for their grade. The money generated from Penny Wars will be split between Student Council and the winning grade, and all canned goods and non-perishables collected for the can drive will be donated to the Pettingale House. All of these groups have been headed by members of Student Council, while the elected board members routinely check in with committee heads and work together to make sure things run smoothly during the school pride event. Grace Poster, Student Council's member at large, is pushing for a Spirit Week during March. Separate from, but similar to homecoming, Spirit Week would involve picking a hallway or other undecided location in the school for each grade to decorate. Though headed by Student Council, Spirit Week would largely be run by the Community Service Club. Each grade would pick a charity to donate to and decorate accordingly. As students turn in their senior pictures for the yearbook, administration has deemed some of the female students' clothing as not being a positive representation of the school. This is in reference to the shoulder and chest exposing shirts that students have worn. The administration has asked that some of the students retake their senior pictures in dress code appropriate clothing. In response to these requests, students have scheduled a meeting with the high school principal, Ms. Daw, to discuss the dress code and its application in the yearbook. Their goal is to have their original senior pictures accepted by the yearbook. On Friday, November 9th, Triton hosted a blood drive with the Red Cross in the gym. Students and educators alike donated blood for the event. Recently, the high school bathrooms, specifically the downstairs boys' bathroom, has been vandalized to the point that administration had to close off the bathroom. This left all the male students to use one upstairs bathroom, leading to disorganization and crowding, as well as the continued vaping. The general consensus among students is that we want to have pride in our school, and that the already damaged bathrooms sometimes provoke students to damage it further. Contrastingly to the boys' bathroom, the girls' bathroom was recently painted a bright white, and the severity of the vandalism has overall decreased. The students understand that there are limitations on a school budget, but a discussion at Student Council suggested that renovations to the bathrooms might improve overall student body behavior and decrease vandalism. Thank you, and please ask any questions.
Thank you, Olivia. I will open it up to questions or comments from the committee.
I just want to ask a question about the yearbook pictures. Was there any criteria sent out prior to the pictures being taken?
Yes, there was an email sent to all students and I think parents that said pictures in the yearbook must be according to the dress code, and that I don't think you could wear any jeans were the requirements. And the dress code being no off-the-shoulder shirts and the two-finger strap dress code.
So when girls wear those shorts to school, is that enforced? You know what I'm saying? Like, if those clothing items are being worn in school.
Speaking as a student who has kind of witnessed this, though some teachers might enforce it or ask students to not wear the shirt again to school, it's not very often that anyone has been dress coded for wearing things that are according to the dress code, which is in the handbook, not allowed.
Yeah. I know parents pay a lot of money to have these pictures taken, so the idea that they have to have them taken again, I think, is going to cause some problems, at least I would think. If the dress code isn't enforced at school, they're going to enforce it for pictures.
So you're looking at me, which is completely appropriate, but I would say, I don't know who's in charge around here. I would say, as Olivia reported, this is a discussion that's going back with Ms. Daw, and I think this report is a great representation of what a student voice for this group or coming to this table should be. Mm-hmm. So could I step in? Easily. But I think this is a great opportunity where the student council, you're speaking on behalf of the student council. These are issues that have been discussed and are scheduling, doing exactly what they should be doing, scheduling a meeting with the principal, having discussions, and we'll take it from there. If I get involved, I will not be shy, as I don't think anyone's expected me to be. But yeah, I can imagine it would get contentious.
Mm-hmm.
Ina?
Can I just piggyback on that? I think what Maureen is really pointing out, and I'll say it outright, if that's our school policy and it's not being enforced, that's an issue that I have.
During the day.
During the day, absolutely. And I think that needs follow-up.
Absolutely.
On your end.
Absolutely. Okay. But I heard you say, Libby, that you think that by and large students are enforcing or are abiding by the dress code?
In school or the yearbook?
I'm sorry, in school on a day-to-day basis.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I heard the opposite.
Okay,
Especially
so
now that it's...
I started to hear the opposite. I thought I had clarified. So I agree that if it's a perpetual issue, again, another issue that if students feel like needs to be addressed goes through student council to the administration. But if overall, absolutely, that's my problem to fix. Yep.
Is it a large number of students that are being asked to retake photos?
I think I'm not sure if they're all being asked to retake them, but I know that there are 24 students whose dress code was deemed inappropriate.
That's a large number of students, in my opinion.
They did go through the yearbook last year and found that I think 18 students in that yearbook, including the valedictorian and salutatorian, were wearing off-the-shoulder shirts. I will report back after they have the meeting with Ms. Daw.
Well, and
Not sure what.
well done, Olivia. I'll take it one step further. It's not going to make it until December before you hear about this again. The discussions will happen, and yes, I imagine that first call that would go home saying you've got to retake your photos is not a chance I'm not going to be involved. So I don't think we'll have to wait till December to hear more about this.
Can I just, I'll let that kind of lie where it is, but can I just get a clarification on our policy? Because I understand that this was in regard to policy that's in the handbook. Does the handbook specifically say, I should have looked this up before, does the handbook specifically state that it has to, because I know a lot of our policies say, you know, a school event, an activity on school grounds, that type of thing is I'll look at you too. Do you know if the policy is specific to how it's written?
I mean, I can't quote it to you, but it generally speaks to at school and school-sponsored events.
Okay.
So then the question is a handbook a school-sponsored event? It's not an event, but it's certainly a school-sponsored publication. So
Okay.
I think it's in the right zone for a discussion. Whether or not pictures are forced to be retaken that's a kind of separate discussion. Yep.
Fair enough. Other questions or comments? Brian, could I just ask you to give a rundown on what happened with the boys' bathroom? Because I think that's...
Yes. So without giving a lot of detail, the boys' restroom was pretty severely damaged. There was a post in the Newburyport Daily News last Wednesday, I believe, which identified it was a juvenile and the location, which should not happen. We've worked with the Newbury Police Department, confirmed that was an error, that should not have been posted, but that the restitution will be part of the issue because those involved were identified. And we will say surveillance cameras work.
Fair enough. Thank you. So just to follow on that, I guess, is there a plan to fix it sooner than later, or where is that sitting?
You mentioned today. I want to say by tomorrow. We're down a half a maintenance staff at each location, so they're trying to figure out how to cover lunch and get that done during the hours. But they're hoping to have that, I think, painted and all reinstalled with the partitions by tomorrow, and then have the discussion about opening it next week and have that discussion.
Perfect. And I just wanted to make a comment to Olivia, since I know she's kind of also our conduit back to the student body as well, that that during the MASC conversation, I'm planning on, I went to a vaping session that had some very concrete things that I have already started to put out emails locally to see if we can work with some regulations to help narrow the availability of products.
And someone...
Yes.
And I'm blanking on who it was that emailed me, but it went through Chief Fowler in Salisbury, noted that Georgetown had installed, what those vaping detectors are called? Yeah, I forget. Do you remember what they're called? There's a... Yeah. So,
Interesting
were those there last year, Heidi? No. Okay. So you can't speak from experience. But I talked to Carol Jacobs, who's the superintendent, and she was going to connect me with someone who can speak to both the effectiveness of those and then the second big question being the price tag to put them in. So we're doing a little research, and hopefully that's something that we could look into. It's like Sentinel or something. My first understanding was that they were fairly effective, which seems like a noise and vaping detector sounds like an odd mix, but we will get more information.
So just saying that piece has not fallen on deaf ears, and it's a big problem to deal with. But, where we can do something, we will do something. So any other questions for Olivia? All right. Thank you for your time, Olivia. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Olivia.
All right, new business? Anybody? Nope. Okay, MASC, MASS joint conference. So there were 6 of us, including Brian, who went to the MASC, MASS joint conference. We went at various times, so, you know, we weren't all necessarily, well, we were all there at the same time during part of it, but some of us left it depending on availability and whatnot. Unfortunately, they have not posted any of the presentations. There were some phenomenal presentations that I sat through there. I know I've heard great feedback from other people who sat through presentations. They ranged on everything. There were 2 regional school specific ones that were there. Dina actually presented at one of them, which was great to see. There were social emotional learning, there were legal, there were policy, there were, you know, pretty much anything we do. There were presentations on there, and some of them were just standout. I mean, you walked away with your brain buzzing because of a million different things. So I'm hoping that we can actually, I don't know, I'll defer to anyone else that wants to actually talk about some sessions tonight, but what I ended up doing was writing up a set of my sessions, just kind of a brief summary and putting it on the school committee drive, and maybe we can talk about some highlights tonight, and then when the presentations are available, I'll actually stick them in that folder as well, so that anybody that might want to page through some of those presentations, because there were some really, really good ones, can do that. I will say the ones that I sat through that were exceptional, the vaping one was very good. It was done by MMA and Cambridge Public Schools, I believe. And it was chock full of information. It had a lot of information on the new legal minimum age for purchasing tobacco and vaping products that's coming in January, and a loophole in that, which is what I was just speaking of, is that it looks like there is a loophole in the law where anyone who is 18 already as of January 1st, when the law goes into effect, will be able to continue to purchase products. So if we have a senior who turns 18 on December 5th, they will be able to continue to purchase products even though the legal age has been raised to 21. They will basically be grandfathered in. And the same thing for, you know, a 19-year-old student or a 20-year-old student. The MMA, the Mass Municipal Association liaison that was there, I double-checked all our towns with him because he said the workaround for that is to have a local health regulation that raises the age for sale to 21 locally. So you basically, if you can't limit who can purchase, you limit what they can sell. None of our 3 towns have such a regulation, so I actually reached out to the 3 Board of Selectmen chairs, and it will be addressed at the DCC tomorrow night to see if we can possibly get a local health regulation in to address that loophole in the meantime, because while it would be nice to say that our seniors can't still go and or that our seniors couldn't go and purchase them on January 1st if they, were under 21, which presumably they all are. That's not going to be the case. If they're 18 already, which a lot of them are at that point, then they'll still be able to continue to purchase locally, which is definitely an issue. I sat through a terrific Families in Crisis session that was run by Saugus Public Schools, had some takeaways from that, and what was the other? There was one other standout session. My report is in the folder, but there were some terrific ones. I don't know if Dina, did you have anything particular you wanted to highlight?
Sure, and then I have the delegate.
Yes.
To go
oh
through
yeah,
too.
absolutely.
As Narissa said, the regional schools one, I was on the panel for one of them. It's one of those situations where it's nice to know that we are doing everything that we can be doing to mitigate our transportation costs. For example, one suggestion they had was to lock into a longer-term contract, which we did. We had the 3 years and then the 2 additional years. The panel was based on, or the discussion was based on the auditor's report. So it was mostly about trying to give other regions, especially those that have regional transportation authorities within their district, information about that, since that's one thing that the auditor's report did raise that is not really being utilized right now, to my knowledge. The general session, which Narissa did not mention, which I don't think we're probably going to get any information on. I had talked to Mike Gilbert about this afterwards. It was on emotional intelligence, and Mark Brackett, who was the speaker, is from Yale and was phenomenal. He was entertaining. He was knowledgeable. He really made you think. I did check out his website and everything. If you have a chance, it's worth the time. Introducing online training to assist schools in addressing behavioral issues was one that I just popped into that I want to give to Kim. This is done through Boston Children's Hospital, and it's run by 2 licensed social workers. These are all free online courses that can be used by anybody, and the 3 that they have up right now, the first one is an overview of social emotional development. What can we expect in the classroom? Second is an introduction to behavioral health in schools. And the third one right now that's available is managing behavioral health crisis in schools. They're short videos. They showed us little snippets of them. It was great. And for something this valuable to be free, I was just blown away by that. Another one I went to on Friday was on cyber liability and how it can affect your district. Leominster, last spring I believe it was, had a breach where they had turned on their computers and they started seeing this, malware and asking for $10,000 in Bitcoin to release their servers. Long story short, against better advice, the superintendent did agree to do that. However, she said she wanted to be sure that at least one server was up and running so that she knew that she was dealing with the hacker, which they did. The downside is it did cost them not just the $10,000, but it took over 2 weeks to get the Bitcoin bought and approved. I don't know how all that works, but so in the meantime, they couldn't pay payroll and they couldn't pay vendors. So it cost them money in the budget the next year. They did end up laying off people. They had a cyber expert there who, the usual things. But some interesting things one interesting thing that he mentioned was, he said, we do safety drills and all of those types of things for our schools. We should be doing cyber drills as well. We should know who to get in touch with if an educator finds something on their computer, and it's just, I thought that was common sense and good practice, but it's something that I think maybe Deb should be looking into. Lastly, just real quickly, the delegate assembly was very interesting. I thought that most of the resolutions that were being proposed were going to be fairly easy to pass. They were not. Real quickly, the 2 that I wanted to mention that did not was Resolution 4, which was on regional school transportation. That, of course, is always a big contentious bone between those of us who are regions and those who are not. Basically, what they decided to do was to send it back to the sending committee, or school committee, to have it re-looked at and reworked. There was a lot of concern about, since it mentioned MGL Chapter 71, that if we had anything in that resolution about that we would be instructing the legislation to do something we didn't want them to do. Although the attorney said that's not the case, that was a big issue. Another one that was of interest is the Resolution 6 regarding reproductive health education. This one they ended up splitting in 2 because the resolution itself, the first part of it asked that, stated that MASC supported evidence-based curricula, and the second part said it wanted to urge the U.S. Department of Education and the executive branch to stop their support of abstinence-only education. They wanted that split, but they both of those parts of the resolution and the resolution as a whole passed. And The last one that brought a lot of discussion was the one on gender-based identity and participation in athletics. Has to do with the gender-neutral bathroom situation and locker room and all of that. It was interesting because there were 2 transgender school committee members there who spoke both for and against what was being presented. Like one school committee wanted to put gender-based bathrooms in front of, in the wording, and they gave good reasoning why you shouldn't. One of them did say how when she was a male in high school, how having a set-aside bathroom actually caused more harm because it brought more attention. So we got rid of that. And essentially what this does is puts it back on the MIAA to make sure that facilities are safe and appropriate. And they wanted to leave it more general, which in this case, as in most cases, the more general you are, the more effective it can be. And that was pretty much it. But the delegate assembly was 2 hours long and very entertaining.
That you were missing for a long time. Maureen?
Well, I just want to reiterate, it was a really great conference. There was lots of really great sessions. The vaping one I went to with Narissa was fantastic. I went to one on therapy animals, which was pretty cool. They had 3 different animals there, but it's Fitchburg Public Schools that's doing a program called TheraPause that school committee member I think has been creating out there, and just how they're using some of their therapy animals, obviously for children that are going through trauma, social emotional issues, but also they've found that some of the therapy animals are helping with improving reading at the elementary level, finding that kids that are, kind of afraid to read in front of their peers are happy to read in front of Mr. Waffles. It's a no judgment zone. So that was interesting. And I did also bring something back for Kim. Linda and I went to one of the vendors, and it's a program that has been started by a young college student. She's a senior at UMass Amherst. And she has it's a 10-part video series on various topics, body image, eating disorders, mental health, gender and sexuality, healthy relationships, empowerment. She was really impressive. She emailed me afterwards, and in her email it has a link, so you can actually check out a sample of her short videos. But I just thought it was interesting because they're short little snippets. She's very engaging, and I thought, maybe students could relate to her. She talks about her own experiences as a teenager and struggling with some mental health issues. So I did bring you back her form. I have other forms too. If people are interested,
Select them all at the end.
Yeah. If people are interested, I can forward you her email. She's an impressive young woman, and she actually UMass has helping her create a major called Empowerment in Education, and she has a double major of political science. So she's a busy woman. Oh, I'm sorry. This is it's middle school and high school. Sorry. Yeah. So, and I watched one of her videos, and it's interesting. I don't know. I'm sure there's some type of cost to it, but I didn't get the sense that it was a very expensive thing to do, and it might be a good supplement to some of the things that we're already doing. So I'll share that with you after.
Feel bad I didn't bring anything back for you, Kim.
I'm nervous about that green bottle in front of you.
It's Palm Olive.
I'm not sure what that is.
Goes up well on camera, too, I'm sure.
Deb, did you have anything to add?
Is that what it is? Okay, just.
It's a water bottle that looks like I'm getting ready to do the dishes. Just quickly, a couple of two of them that other people here did not attend, and these are 2 very, very different ones. One was called Financing Our Future Stakeholder Engagement Experience, And this is a visual, and I know that one thing that we're trying to do this year is to do that with the stakeholders. And there were tables set up, which with what looked like a very large board game. And it was interactive. There were, I think, 6 to 8 people could be at one table, and it just showed all the pieces and how they fit together. And it's not something I can describe well because it is a visual, but sometimes when you're trying to educate people about any topic, if you have a visual to go with your words, it's quite helpful. And these school districts that had used it had used students to facilitate it, but the people participating were townspeople. So it's something that, again, I don't have the visual, so that's difficult, but I think it was worth looking at as an alternative to perhaps educate people a little bit more. Another one I went to was about trauma-sensitive schools, and I went to that because I think it was last year that Jim Montanari told us how many students at Salisbury Elementary had experienced some sort of trauma. And this was so much common sense, but I guess I hadn't really thought about it until somebody put it into the words at this workshop, and talked about the different types of trauma. It could be observing somebody being hit. It could be just loud yelling. It could be a car accident. It could be the death of a family member. It could be a lot of different things that traumatize anyone, but in this case, younger students. And what happens when they're experiencing trauma on a repeated basis is they go into the classroom and they are in a state of hypervigilance, which I had never thought about. And not to sound silly, but all I can picture is a little prairie dog sitting, so there's always one prairie dog that's sitting there like this, looking around all the time. So that's what the student is doing. So the student can't learn if the student is hypervigilant and looking around for signs of danger all the time. So it's pretty basic common sense, but I just hadn't thought of it that way. So 2 very different, but again, they're ones that I was at. And I think some of the things they use for phrases, a calming center in the classroom, and the other word they used was a regulation station. I think we could all use regulation stations every once in a while. Okay.
Thank you. Linda?
I went to similar ones, and just so you know, Mr. Waffles was a cat. Not a dog. Which surprised me.
Was he the one that was honored with the life member? We have pictures of Mr. Waffles then. Yeah, they posted them online. Yeah, the cat wasn't the life member.
That was the woman that created the Therapause program.
So I went to one workshop that was virtual learning, and what I thought was interesting about this particular one was that it focused on professional development for the teachers that taught the online classes. And it was 10 weeks, 8 hours a week that the teacher had to put in if they wanted to be part of this collaborative of learning online. And what it is it's directed through the guidance counselor, so because they have 3 people who are in charge to make sure the students are logging in, that they monitor the teachers teaching the classes. So what happens is if a student hasn't logged in, they get a hold of the guidance counselor, and if the student's struggling with the class, they come up with something to support this child. So I thought it was amazing. They had 68 classes that were offered, and 2 of the schools, they actually have they call it a cyber cafe, and that's the block that they use for students who want to take those online classes. They kind of built them into their schedules. And I talked to them about unions, like how do you get around the unions? And they said that they speak directly with the unions and that they're not taking away a class that the teacher is offering. It might be that a student needs that class but can't fit it in their schedule. So that's how they talk to the unions about having the class being taught online. So I just thought it was interesting because any district, any teacher who wants to be involved with it can be involved with it.
So is this like a consortium where you have a whole group of teachers from various high schools that are
Yes.
part of it that offer
Collaborative.
like a course? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I just thought it was interesting because with our declining enrollments, which you heard it throughout the conference, everyone's having declining enrollments, people losing courses, and a lot of our students are at a disadvantage because they're up against, a lot of schools that offer these programs. So they figured that they would come up with this consortium to help better educate students who don't have that availability. And I just thought it was great that teachers anywhere could be part of this and go through this intense professional development, and they could use that in their own classes as they teach.
I was going to say, so we've used Virtual High School or Fuel Ed, but what's nice about this is it is a collaborative, but now they've figured out how, our collaboratives and consortiums have talked about that, but then how do you make it cost effective for those outside the consortium or collaborative? So they've clearly figured this out, that it's a big enough operation that they can extend a
Right.
lot further. So that quick thing we looked at, it was about 20% of the cost of the larger.
Yeah, because the more students that take a class, it lowers the price. So it's not like a flat amount. So, I mean, there was tons of questions, and they were great because I forget where they are, but they're farther away than we are. So I was asking, because they have a sign language class, and they say that the teacher meets with a group of students at a library because the schools are closer together that they have in the consortium right now. And she said, so I said, what happens if a student's 50 miles away from that teacher? She says, there's FaceTime. You can have a group of students go on at the same time and the teacher conversing with the student. It's anything that the student needs. It's the individual learning of the students. And I was like, wow, it's just powerful. There was one other one that I went to. It was Safety in Schools, and I know it was Cambridge who has, but it was interesting to me because they have a resource officer at every school. They have a whole network where they have a sergeant that's in charge of just resource officers and stuff like that. But some of the things that they were doing, I look at what our 3 communities do with our 3 chiefs and the student and the resource officer and how closely he looks at the kids. So I credit our school that some of the stuff that they were doing, we're already doing. And that's what always makes me happy when I go to these conferences, that a lot of the things they talk about, we're already doing them, or we're just doing them, or we're way ahead of some of the people who are doing them.
So I appreciate. Did you have anything to add?
So
Sorry.
I would two quick things. Dina mentioned Mark Brackett. So he's from the Yale University Center for Emotional Intelligence. I actually reached out to him. I haven't heard back yet, but he would be a phenomenal way to open up the year at Convocation. Just his whole, we talk about SEL, right? Social emotional learning is the kind of the buzzword. We talk about mental health, but to go back to emotional intelligence and how that intersects, and just talking about feelings, and we don't do that. And I mean, he was brilliant. I mean, beyond entertaining, he was absolutely brilliant. So I've reached out to him. I mean, I don't know what he costs, but it's higher ed. Maybe he had a lot of investors, right? He kept saying he has money for that. So, in grants. The other thing I wanted to mention is you brought up cybersecurity, and I would be remiss to not give a little shout out to our network and information systems administrator, Matt Liakos. He's actually here working on projects late into the night. But for all of the eye rolling that I know I'm guilty of, rolling eyes when I can't get into something or the security, he is on the cutting edge of security. We've had trainings. He's brought vendors in. A lot of the spending that's been done in the last 2 years has been about increasing our security so that you can never be completely protected from cyber attacks and from ransomware, which is what you were describing. But I think we are in very good hands. We all probably drive him crazy. 424 of us drive that one person crazy, but he does incredible work. As much as he drives everyone crazy, he does incredible work. So I want to just thank him for that.
Can I? So is he, well, he sounds like he would be the key person that we need to kind of build a response around. Would that be accurate?
And I would say the response is there. I mean, it's there's how many routinely getting emails. Be careful about this. Here's a little warning. So people are pretty good now that if they see something suspicious, there's the easy kind of phishing email where I haven't got it, but I'm sure So yeah, so Michelle gets an email from me. Hey, can you send me something? It wasn't from me. Or the accountant gets an email from me or from Michelle saying, hey, I need you to send off this. It didn't come from us. So there's those, and then there's the more egregious attacks. But most of these start pretty simply. So it's about educating people. So we need to do more. I think we need to do more global, district-wide. We've done a lot. We've done training for administrative staff and have those discussions. But it's a significant risk. And you mentioned the ransomware. It generally council will say. So the story behind that is there's an honor code. On the black market with this, where if you're going to be a ransomware man or woman, you can't claim you're a ransomer and not follow through. So if you hijack and and encrypt the files, and then you demand a ransom and don't give it, then you're not going to be believed next time. So there's this weird honor to the folks who are doing this. So generally, they make it a reasonable amount. Give me $5,000, $10,000. We could figure that out. So that you'll do it, because otherwise we'd be dead in the water. But we back up all over the place. He's got backups in every continent and multiple times a day. So if that ever happened, we'd be in as good a shape as we possibly could be. We're there. So.
That's good, because a lot of what you've just mentioned were talked about at this seminar. But I just think that if we have, I would just like to, for my own peace of mind, I'd like to know that there is some protocol in line that if something happens, we have, just like at safety committees, you have that checklist of how you proceed, so people aren't running in circles going, okay, do we call Deb? Do we call Matt? Do we call Brian? Do we,
Yeah, and it's very simple. It's put a help desk ticket in. If you have something that's suspicious, leave it alone, put a help desk ticket. And if you mark something urgent, you can call and you might miss them, but on the help desk, everything's dinging on them and someone gets the right message. So it's, for all of the extra work it causes people to be really secure, he does a phenomenal job. So I don't think he gets thanked an awful lot.
Well, thank you,
Matt.
because that's awesome. This was frightening to hear.
Yes.
I heard that was the scariest session of the entire conference.
Well, and to his credit, when this is the world he lives in, so that's what he thinks about all night is, if this happens, this is my baby. So
how does he sleep?
Not sure how he does. And he's got 2 babies too. So
We need a trauma-sensitive IT department.
Yes, therapy, put the massage chairs down there.
Yes. So for those who went, thank you very much. I know people took days off from work. You took time off from your family. You missed events. I appreciate it, because clearly, we can bring back things that have real savings, practical applications. The amount of stuff you can get from a conference like this clearly can come back and pay itself back in spades. So I appreciate you taking that time. And I also wanted to say too that, part of it is definitely the sessions. Part of it is just meeting people and finding out the best practices in their district. And I'm glad that Principal McCrae is here, because I understand that there's going to be a Triton Newburyport softball game in the spring, and that you were given as Steve Cole recommended you as an excellent captain for the Triton team.
Steve from the Newburyport committee?
Yeah.
On the team.
So I appreciate you stepping forward on that. All right, and that actually brings you up to the middle school aligned schedule update, please.
Nice segue.
Thank you.
Nicely timed. So just to introduce, so Alan McCrae is the middle school principal, and Heidi Monjo is the new middle school principal. So again, I asked them, we talked about having them come, what did I say? Oh, good Lord.
All right, we share it.
The assistant principal. But we had talked about having them come to give you an update in October, and we decided it makes more sense, give it a couple months, let things play out. It's brand new. So it's still, I would say, fair to say it's still very brand new, but having them come and give you a firsthand update on the pros and cons of this new schedule.
All right. All right, so you have a one-pager. I don't want to sit here and read it to you. Obviously, you can read yourself, but I'll try to go through some of the bigger points. So, as a history, we've always had, well, for the last little while, we've had a 5-day, Monday through Friday schedule. No drop, but a full rotation. We also had 4 academic teams with team leaders and such. So moving from that to a 7-day waterfall drop schedule has been, you know, for lack of a better term, a pretty big culture shock to the middle school. As much as you can talk about it and prepare people for it, once you kind of get into it and you start seeing things play out, you know, different people have had different reactions. So I think probably the biggest struggle or challenge we've had is working through that whole, we all got hired, we all been in a team atmosphere, you know, a smaller schedule, going to this big thing and all that kind of angst that comes out of that. I will credit the middle school teachers for kind of grabbing this thing and going at it and asking questions and doing what they feel is best and really kind of hitting it head on. And I don't think I've seen any adverse reaction from the students. I think the students have, you know, the 7th graders come in, they don't really know any better. They know they're going to get a new schedule anyways. I was a little concerned about the 8th graders because they're the ones that really are going to be affected by this. But the small conversations I've had with certain kids, they, you know, they adapt pretty quickly. And I haven't heard any, I haven't had people like pushing my door in, I need to talk to the principal, this schedule's awful. So, so that's been, at least from the kids. So that's been good. I think we've been able to offer some things. You know, so, we talk about the G block. That was kind of something we had to absorb because the high school really needs a G period to be able to give the programming they need to give for graduation requirements and such. So we've tried to put some things in place so that kids aren't just kind of hanging out during G period. A lot of kids are taking advantage of that, getting homework done, getting extra help. Teachers are starting to step up and noticing the kids who need help. A couple of groups of teachers have put kids on rotations and they have to go through, you know, science one day, social studies the next day, maths, and keeping these kids kind of on task. So that's been good to see. We brought in a couple high school teachers to do chorus and video production, one of which I think is here. So that's been kind of good. We've put in an art extension, kind of a makerspace thing for 7th graders. So all in all, about half the school during G period is doing something. They're not just kind of hanging out in a quote-unquote study hall. So that's good. And we've also been able to put in some intervention time for students, Tier 2 needs that came up from elementary school, which we've never really had time for. We identified them early on last spring, and over the summer I kind of finalized the list, so we were able to kind of hit the ground running with that. So that's been a good thing. You know, again, the part of the drawback about G period is we do so much there, we run out of people really quick of who can do things. So we have some ideas going forward how we can kind of change that. I think our schedule next year might look a little bit more like the high school does, where we're not kind of married to just G period. So right now, G period across the school is kind of a non-academic period. We do band, we do chorus, all that stuff there. There's no reason we can't move that kind of block around and have it different for different students based on their needs. So, you know, you may have a high school student now that has, you know, a B period study hall. There's no reason a middle school student couldn't have something similar to that, and they'll go get an intervention during that period, or maybe I just make B period the chorus period or the band period. So we're taking notes every day on things we need to look at and change. We're also able to add in a new rotation of 7th grade classes, the writing lab, language and culture, which is kind of an introductory foreign language, a wellness class, and a computer science class, which has been very popular. Kids are learning to do some coding and stuff like that. The wellness class has been great because we've been able to really beef up whatever health curriculum we have, including adding sex ed this year, which has been an interesting add. Kudos to those teaching that. It's not me. So all in all, I walked around today and I talked to some teachers. I just said, you know, just looking at the schedule, how you have to approach your job, how you have to plan. You know, tell me what's been good, what's been bad. So the feedback I get is the drop has been tough because they're used to seeing kids every single day, and when you drop a class, you miss that class for the day. There's been a couple of complications which I think we can fix with just better planning. Like the last couple of weeks, we had a Veterans Day assembly, we had a field trip to Whittier, and then a drop class, and then a long weekend, so we missed like D period like 5 times out of 7 days, and that is something we just have to look at going forward to fix, and we can move things around so we don't do that. So when that happens, that period, that class doesn't get seen by a teacher for a long period of time. I can understand where that comes from because that's a huge gap, and you have to get that class caught up pretty quickly, and it's hard to do. They feel, a few of the teachers I talked to feel, they feel better prepared for classes because the blocks are longer, their planning period's longer, they have more time to be prepared. I talked to one teacher, she said, I'm almost like planned out like a week and a half in advance, which is really settling for me because I can just go into my next class and know what I'm going to teach and know what's coming up. So that's been a good thing. They do miss, we had, I don't know if you remember, but last year and the years prior, we had what we call a flex period, extended flex period, which we kind of just wedged into Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, where every student was available, unless you're in band and chorus. We're trying to do so much with G period. There are a lot of kids that I think teachers would like to have available for them, but they don't want to say, well, come see me, but I don't want to take you out of going to drama class, so maybe see me tomorrow. So they miss having a solid block where there's always everybody available. They like the fact that the schedule isn't so rigid. If anybody has ever taught, you always look at the schedule and you say, Friday, last period, what is my class? And it's always the same class on our old schedule. So now that's not the case. It rotates through, so it could be multiple different classes on the last period on Friday, just for instance. We also have a 44-minute class, which backs up against a 72-minute long block. So that gives a little bit of variety to the day, where it's not just 5 days of the same kind of blocks over and over again. And then some 8th grade teacher said, I think the 8th graders will certainly be better and more adaptable to the high school once they get there, because the schedule is going to be exactly the same as they're in now. And probably the other thing is we've had interesting conversations about how many times you meet with a class versus how many minutes you're teaching. There's a difference there, and I acknowledge that, and as I've talked to teachers today, I do get that. It's an unavoidable thing in a rotating schedule where you drop a class. At the end of the year, we have more probably instructional time than we had in our last schedule, but that missed meeting, it's a big deal. I mean, that is a big deal. And I asked one teacher, said, do you think by the end of the year you're going to have some workarounds about how you better manage this and all that? And no, I think they're cautiously optimistic that will be the case. I know the high school's been doing this for a long time, so I know it can be done. So again, it's new. People are getting into it. We've had a couple conversations about, you know, we don't have teams anymore. Who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for that? But I've seen, as we've gone through, some people have stepped up and taken care of field trips and taking care of things like that. So I'm just continuing conversations, trying to get feedback from people when they want to come talk to me about it, and taking a lot of notes, and hope to make, you know, some changes that make sense for next year. I will also add this. I had an unsolicited email from a high school teacher. This is the first school year that I don't see a statistical drop-off from my morning ABCD classes to my afternoon classes, EFG. As a matter of fact, my E and G classes have a higher average than my A and C classes do this year. And that's based on the last, how many years the high schools had a double rotation, where you never saw A, B, or C in the afternoon, you never saw E, F, or G in the morning. And, you know, some teachers say you have the same kids in the afternoon all the time, they have a certain thing, and the kids in the morning have a certain thing. So I don't know if that's across the school. It certainly was the case for this one teacher. I think I might ask Catherine about, you know, if she's heard that or seen that from other teachers. That might be an interesting piece out of this too that I didn't even think about. So I guess that's about it, without boring you. So I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
Open it for questions. Dina?
First of all, I want to thank you for all the time and effort you put into this, because I remember all the work and all the conversations that had to occur in order to get this schedule in place. I appreciate tonight that you are bringing not only the good that's happening, but some of the challenges that you're finding. I want to understand a little bit more about when you said that teachers miss having that time to just pull kids out. I'm not quite clear. The flex time that was last year?
Yeah.
Why does that not occur in the G period?
Well, it does, but we're also trying to, we have around 400 students in the middle school. We didn't want them just, G period comes, they sit, maybe some of them have homework to do, you know, maybe some of them have to go make up a test or something like that. But we wanted to try to give them other opportunities, because not all students need intervention. Not all students need that extra time to do homework. They do it at home, or they do a good job with it. So if someone wanted to have something else available, they could go do it. So that's why we kind of talked to the high school about having some availability of their teachers for those 2 classes for 8th grade, and we had a teacher that was trained on Makerspace that really wasn't utilizing it, so we wanted to use that. It's also a time special ed takes a lot of students. It's also a time we're doing those interventions for 7th graders that are on Tier 2. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You want to keep kids busy, but you also want to have them available. So what we're trying to work with now is like the high school. If anybody's had a student go to the high school, there's some classes that meet on like days 2, 4, and 6, or 3, 5, and 7. So we're trying to say, okay, you can go do drama on 3, 5, and 7, but you're going to be with me on 2, 4, and 6. We're trying to work those kind of things out. And it's just new. It's new for the guidance department to schedule it. It's new for us to even think about it. I got to give props to Megan Ober. I walk into her office, I just see her go, oh no, here he comes again. But she's been really good, and when we went through the whole process of trying out different kinds of schedules, she was very open to trying to make it work for the high school and keep everything they needed. You know, we walked through some 5-day schedules, we worked through some 6-day schedules. We just ended up settling on this. It's not going to be perfect for everybody, but it's working, and we hope to make it work better.
So can I just add, so the key difference is a shorter period of time, 25, 30 minutes, where everyone was free, but there was no directed other opportunities, whereas now the G is the only opportunity there. So it could be intervention, it could be special ed services, it could be an elective. So it gives a whole lot more opportunity, but there are some trade-offs. So that's the key difference, is rather than having that complete unstructured time for basically the entire school, which I saw as a loss of instructional time. I think we agreed on that then, so that's where one of the trades is. But as Al said, I think there's many tweaks to come.
Thank you.
Paul, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yep. So, Ellen, I just have a question. These high school math students that are coming down, are they working with struggling 8th grade math students, or are they working with high-performing 8th grade math students, or are they working with both?
I believe they're working with anybody who'd like to get some help. I mean, it might be someone who does really well in math who just wants to expand that, or someone who's struggling and helping out the math teacher, sitting down with a group of kids and working through some stuff.
Just one other question. Do you have a sense of how many high school math students are working down with the kids?
I don't. I'd have to. I know 2 because I walked into them and said, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" You know, and they explained to me what they were doing. So I know of 2.
Okay, thank you.
But I can get you a number on that.
Deb?
I think it's no surprise that there are glitches. This is, as you said, this is a huge change, but it sounds to me like the potential for learning is very great, and that the time is going to be used more efficiently than it may have been in the past. But how long, you said it was 25 minutes was the...
It was a little longer
last year, and how long is that same?
The trade-off was last year we had to kind of cram in, it's like a 40-minute block. But to do that, all the afternoon classes had to shrink down to like 40 minutes as well. So, you know, so that everything got shorter in those 2 afternoons. So there was some trade-off of time.
Right, but the time period last year where everybody was free was 25 minutes?
Well, I'm sorry. We had a flex period every day around lunch. So
Right.
8th graders at lunch, 7th grade was in flex. That was 25 minutes, yes.
So that G block is how long?
58,
Oh, so it's
44,
long.
or 72,
Okay.
depending on what day
Thank
it
you.
falls on. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? Paul? grab a mic, please. Yeah.
I think you mostly answered a question I had, which was around dropping the one block and that being a new thing. But it sounds like your faculty is aware that you're aware this is a difficulty. Having gone through that sort of transition, that awareness that my administration knows the difficulty I'm going through is a really big deal. So if they're aware that you know it's challenging, I think that's a really big positive.
Yeah, well, like I wrote in my thing, I've never worked in a environment that didn't have teams and didn't have the schedule like we used to have. I mean, I went here as a student and I had a rotating 7-day or 6-day schedule. I can't remember what it was now. But as an administrator, I certainly have not had any experience with this. So I could try to tell them we're kind of all jumping into this thing together. And I do feel the pain. But I think where there's a will, there's a way. And I think, you know, for having some of the people who are really, really negative about this to at least kind of give me a little, okay, I see that point. This isn't that bad. I can work around that. I think that's going in the right direction.
Any other comments or questions? Anybody? I appreciate your time here tonight, and I appreciate meeting Ms. Mongeau. Welcome to Triton. And hopefully we can hear back from you in the springtime, late spring, and just get another quick update on this, since that'll be close to your completion of your first full year, and kind of see what's worked out and where there are still issues and that type of thing. That'd be great to hear.
Happy to.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, fiscal year 18 supplemental budget update. So this is my oral update to you. Back in July, I believe it was, the governor issued started a bill for a fiscal year 18 supplemental budget. So this is literally July 1st, 2017 to June 30th, 2018, the year that we had basically already completed, they were going to add more money to. It was really encouraging to see that they had another $7 million of regional school transportation in there, which would have brought regional school transportation from 71%, I believe, right, to 80%, and also an additional $12.5 million of circuit breaker, which would have brought circuit breaker back up to 75%, which is what we had all forecasted to be at the beginning of the year. And then due to a increase in tuitions, it had ended up being closer to 68%, which left us in the lurch. You know, we had forecasted that we would be receiving the 75% reimbursement from the state, and then it just didn't come through, and all the districts had to cover the difference, had to cover that gap. It was really encouraging, and then on one day, it very quickly came out of the House Ways and Means Committee, and it no longer included either of those items, and the initial governor's bill had also included I want to say $70 million in school security and mental health, which had been knocked down to $15 million. It very quickly went through the House. Our senator, Senator Tarr, attempted to put a hold on it in the Senate and send it back to the Ways and Means Committee for reconsideration on those items that were no longer included in the bill. That was voted down by the Senate, and it very quickly made it through the Senate and was signed by the governor into law. So unfortunately, we did not get that additional supplemental funding. There will be some grants available that we can apply for school security and mental health, but traditionally those have gone to schools that are viewed as having a higher need than Triton does, so I'm not sure that we'll actually see any of that money. But that's a quick update on fiscal year 18
Say it
supplemental.
went through quickly, measured in hours, not days or weeks.
Yes, literally measured in hours. It sat for 4 months, I think, and then it was brought out of committee. From what I've been told, they were emailed at 10:43 that it was coming out of committee. The House met at 11. The Senate very quickly put it through there, and I think it was signed at 4:15 in the afternoon, which is light speed for the Mass State Legislature. It is unheard of. So it is what it is. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to fiscal year 20 operating budget. First look, please. I don't know. Michelle, are you? Brian?
I'm happy to tee this up. So just to set the scene, we've been having discussions with DCC, with the chairs, in regards to making sure that any preliminary numbers we talk about are expenditures. I think I've made the mistake in the past of starting to project what that might look like for an assessment, what we might get for revenues, and I think the towns would like to see that information, but there is absolutely no way for us to predict that. So what we can speak to in a fairly confident and educated way is where we see expenditures. So the report that Michelle's going to present is speaking to just that. Doesn't include any revenue offsets, and makes some assumptions and then some very clear-cut knowns for expenditures. But there's no the word revenue and the word assessment does not exist on this report. Incredibly purposefully. Michelle.
Thank you. So on page 71, which is the preliminary FY20 operating budget expenditure analysis, this is basically just a snapshot of where I am projecting the numbers for the next year. This does not take any requests into consideration, any changes that may occur at this point. We do know our step and COLA costs for the most part, assuming we don't have too many staffing changes. We always have a small amount of staffing changes throughout the year. But there shouldn't be anything significant. So our step and COLA is already set because of all the union negotiations. We are contracted, and that will be approximately $783,000. The COLA for non-union members would be just over $71,000, and that's estimated at this point. Obviously, that's not necessarily contractual, but we do try to treat our non-union staff members as we give COLA to the union members as well. Salary reserve, we are looking at an increase. Well, it's not necessarily an increase. We used all of last year's. Actually, I can go back. We did not use most of last year's. We typically budget for about $120,000 in a salary reserve line. We did not use all of it. We actually have about $80,000 right now, but we do have some additional staffing needs in special education that we may end up using some of that. So as of 2 weeks ago, we had a pretty good surplus still in our salary reserve. At this point, it's looking a little bit lower than I had hoped. So 2 weeks ago, I was looking at an increase of $20,000 for that reserve line. Retirement staff reduction, we do not have much information to go on at this time, so we're not going to count on any of that. Column movement, this is when teachers and instructional assistants can submit for column movement on their schedule. They get additional professional development credits, or they get additional degrees, which will place them in a different column. They have to submit with that information by December 15th, so that will be a known number of the maximum number by January 1. So at this time, we are estimating about $50,000. Last year, we were extremely high. I believe it was about $140,000 that we had to budget, and we used just over $100,000 of that. So the total salary changes that we are anticipating at this point is just over $925,000. In terms of the non-salary changes, the medical insurance benefits is really a wild card. Our PEC negotiations, our Public Employee Committee, will begin negotiations within the next month. And we could be restructuring medical insurance plans. We could be looking at deductibles. We may not. So we really don't know what the insurance, if it will have an increase or not. Medical inflation is currently running at 6.5%. So that's kind of the number that we stuck in there just as a placeholder for discussion purposes. May not be that. We could very well be looking at a 0%, but we don't know that at this point. Liability and workman's compensation insurance. We currently have a very good modification rate for our workers' comp policy. However, it looks back at the past 3 years, and we've had substantial long-term claims over the past couple of years, so those are going to start affecting us next year. So I do anticipate that's going to go up at least $15,000. Unemployment, actually, I am expecting a decrease. We upped that budget a little bit this year because of all the reductions that we had to experience this past spring. So I confidently feel that unless we have a similar situation with more reductions, that we'll be able to realize a savings of about $25,000 in next year's budget. Retirement and taxes, the Essex Regional Retirement System, that assessment increases for about roughly $100,000 per year. This year we lucked out. I think it was roughly about $80,000, but typically it's about $100,000, and our Medicare tax, which is a percentage of our total payroll. Our special education out-of-district costs, right now, this was a snapshot a couple weeks ago. We were estimating $389,000. This is based on known students with a 70% circuit breaker reimbursement rate, and as Narissa stated, that number is pretty much a wild card. It's usually in that ballpark, but a few percentage points, going down to 65 or 75 can make a huge difference to us. And these are known students. These aren't including any move-ins or any unknown students that we don't know of at this point. There are some placeholders for known students, which we do not know what's going to happen specifically with those students. So that number could go down, but most likely it's unlikely that it will decrease. Transportation, as Dina recommended earlier, we did have a 5-year contract with our transportation provider. We were very lucky, and next year's increase will be just over $28,000, which is a great increase to be looking at for our transportation of all of our 24 buses that we run. The middle school and high school cleaning services contract, we are in our final year of that contract. Not really sure what will happen, but we're estimating a 3% increase of $8,400. Utilities, we are not anticipating an increase in this area because our gas and electric rates are locked in for FY20, so that's a good thing. And then one-time funding we had in the current fiscal year, the FY19 budget, was for $57,500 for funding of the surveillance cameras and the Raptor software. That was really a one-time cost, so we want to make sure that we reflect that decrease in our operating budget, because certainly it's not going to be a carried forward cost. So total non-salary changes in $918,060. So the total estimated operating increase, based on a snapshot as of a couple weeks ago, is $1,843,322, or 4.52%. As you can see at the notes, some of the items in bold reflect early estimates that are likely to be adjusted. Made a note of the medical benefits that can change as we're just entering negotiations. And then we just made a couple notes about possible decrease scenarios. If we did not have an increase in SPED out of district, we'd be looking at an increase of 3.57%. If there was no increase in medical insurance, we'd also be looking at just an increase of 3.57%. And if there was no increase in SPED out of district or medical, we'd actually be looking at an operating increase of 2.62%. Are there any questions on this one-page snapshot that is very preliminary at this time?
If I can just add one piece of context, and I shared this with the Finance Subcommittee. So, and I didn't bring the paper with me. I'm always hesitant to talk about the cost of out-of-district placements for students, because these are services that these students need and deserve. But as a reference point, there are 9 students on that list that are costing $702,000. And these are new settlements, new outplacements, just moved in. So aside from those changes that have all happened in the last 6 months, is that fair, Dave, that sheet we were looking at? We'd be going down $320,000. So just to give you context of how this can change, and again, I think this is context for the towns, again, not to ever suggest in any way that these students don't need, require, and deserve, and it's our moral obligation to provide these services. But just as far as the town's understanding of how quickly this can change, it's a wild card. And I mean, to say we can't control it is truth. So there's things where, people, look at people in Dave's job and beat him up. There's only so much we can do. the reality is students move in, students require services, and we have to provide them. So just wanted to provide that context.
Any questions or comments?
I just have a question.
Jim?
So what you're saying is without the offsets, you have about a 4.5.
Oh yeah, microphone, please.
Without the offsets, you basically have a 4.5% increase. Just what is it traditionally? Is that the number you traditionally, what does you usually have without the offsets and everything, chargebacks?
So I don't remember do you remember the percentage last year? Historically, if you look back at the last 10 years, it's been between 0 and, I mean, the overall, again, if to look at assessment increases versus operating, I'd have to go back and look at that. But operating has been fairly minimal, 0 to 3. 4.5 is a larger increase. Last year was the largest increase. We were at $3 million at this point last year. So better than last year, but still worse than it's been historically. The figure, that $925,000, that salaries, that's been, I would say, static, but that's been north or south of 900,000 pretty consistently. You know, last year there was lots of discussion about the 2.75%. That 0.75% was the smallest little piece of the issue in last year's budget. So as an organization, that payroll, that number has been around that 900,000.
That number is really not out of line with what a lot
No.
of communities are going through.
No.
That's somewhat consistent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I was asking what
Yes.
it was prior years.
Yes, and I feel like we've been a lot better in previous years, and now has it caught up? I don't know what the answer is, but last year and this year have been more in line. You've got.
I have it right here. FY19 was a 4.58% increase.
So you're talking
Just
the expenditure,
budget,
the operating.
yes,
Okay.
operating budget. But FY18 was only a 1.46% increase, and pretty much the years before that were 1s, 2s. There was a 3 in there in the past 10-year history.
The past couple of years, it started to
Yes.
catch up, in essence, with what's going on statewide.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Fortunately, that's tied to when I became superintendent. I don't know what that means. It's the business manager, clearly. I don't know.
Any other questions or comments? So this will be covered at the DCC tomorrow night.
In detail, one would say.
In detail, yes, likely. I anticipate the conversations will be very similar, though, to past years. So, all right. District Communications Committee meeting follow-up discussion. So you should have in your packets the meeting notes from the October 4th DCC meeting, which was held here. A lot of it was logistical. I think, I'd welcome. It's hard when you're running a meeting, I find, to totally gauge the tone accurately. I felt like it was more positive than it's been in the past. I felt like we came back to the board and said, kind of, let's restructure this group and let's see how we can make it work better, how we can change things up and kind of, I think J.R. Colby said it at one point, it's one thing when you're in your comfort zone and you're at home and you have your person in place and it feels like and everyone else was coming to us. So that was the position we were in. So what happens when you have a new person in place leading it and you're elsewhere, you're away from home. So we're all going to try that and see how that works moving on. We do have dates set up. They're not in here, but they're in the they'll be in the DCC agenda for tomorrow night, which you've already received by email. They'll have the locations for all of the DCC meetings through next May, I believe, either May or June, depending on how far we set them up. And they're literally going to rotate through the towns. We had, I think, split discussion on chairmanship last month. It was there was a group that felt like that shifting the chairmanship was the appropriate way to go, and there was a group that felt like consistency was a better way to go. So we decided to try this. Ronalie Ray-Perrott from Salisbury is going to chair tomorrow night's meeting, and then we'll see how it goes from there. I don't know. I think those are kind of the big ticket items that we discussed at the last DCC. Did anyone else that was there have any commentary on it?
Good summary.
Nobody? Okay. Moving on to subcommittee goal follow-up, which is also me. So I had printed the goals sheet, which I hopefully have. So I've lost my goals sheet that I printed out. I will try to find it. But basically, we are making some gains on goal number 1, which was the PR goal. And Brian, I know, is going to talk about the annual report. You saw a draft of it in your email, so that's in progress. We're aiming for that for November. So that's looking good. And I know there's some action on some of the other items, which included meeting with the chairs, and I know there were some other meetings that, meeting with the Council on Aging, which Policy and Advocacy has taken on and been doing, reaching out to the PTAs and starting to make a lot of those connections. Goal 2 had the 3 meetings per member, attending other meetings. I sent out an email that had the full schedule, at least as full as I can make it so far, to you, so you should have access to that. I know we have had a few members that have signed up already for dates on that, just to say these are the ones I'm intending to go to, just so that we don't have 4 people at one particular meeting. Included boards of selectmen meetings, finance committee meetings, PTA meetings, Tempo, TEF. There's quite a variety of boards that are included on there. I'm going to leave this agenda item on here just so that we can both update on the goals as we go to make sure we're continuing to hit them, and also that as people are going to those meetings, they can update us on what was said at those meetings. I'll start. I went to the Pine Grove PTA meeting last night. I was happy to hear that they were considering putting a good amount of their funding towards a lease of Chromebooks, and they're actually going to lease 60 Chromebooks it's on I believe a 3-year lease, right? Yeah. 3-year lease, and it's intended primarily for K through 2 at Pine Grove to be able to use those. So that was terrific. They are settling into their new board. They recently had elections, and I believe almost the entire board was replaced. They're doing some terrific work with the other PTAs through things like the Random Acts of Kindness, and they're all doing a Triton Night at the Sea Festival of Trees up at the Blue Ocean Events Center, which is, I believe, next week. I think Triton Night is Tuesday. So they were all busy putting together trees and coming up with ideas and staffing and things like that. So it was good to hear. They seemed very positive, and they're, there's definitely a hubbub. It was also nice to see they had a lot of people there. I'm going to guess there were 30 people. Not all of them were parents. Some of them didn't even have kids in the district anymore. Which was nice to see. There were a number of teachers that were there, and at the end, they just had an all-out brainstorming session. What do we want to do moving forward? What are people interested in? That type of thing, to let people just kind of lay their ideas on the table and see what had a consensus and be able to run with it. So it was a very democratic process, I would say. Did anyone else attend meetings? I don't think I saw anybody else on that list. Oh, Deb has a question.
Just kind of as a reminder, when we walk into a meeting, particularly if it's not in the town we live in or something, the people at that meeting might not know why we're there.
Yes.
So it might be a good idea to remind everybody to introduce yourself when you go to a meeting.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's even nice to be able to, if have the chair's contact information, which most of them are available on public websites, just be able to shoot them an email and say, hey, I'm just giving you a heads up. I don't want to make it a big deal, but I'm going to be there. Love to participate and be able to watch and, that type of thing. All right, perfect. Moving on to the MSC Regional Schools Report. Dina, please.
Thank you. Our last meeting, I kind of gave you the outline of what our meeting entailed. Since this is my first year as chair of this committee, I kind of did a brainstorming to begin with, and we came up with some ideas that MASC Regional Schools Committee has done a lot of very hard work, but it seems to be the same small group of people who are trying to get things done, and we're not reaching the entire state. So that is one thing that we really wanted to talk about, was how we can expand membership. So at the conference, we set aside 2 tables. We did get a few other people to sign up to give me their email so that we can at least push out the information that we are sending to our members. One thing that we discussed was for new members, and since we have 2, it would be of interest to you. In the Charting the Course, although it's a very good course and it touches on regions, as we all around this table know, regional districts are a whole different animal. And we are going to come up with a separate training that could be used either in conjunction with Charting the Course or separately to kind of help new regional members understand our unique roles. The website information on the MASC website for this particular committee is way out of date. I've already talked to Glenn about that. Hopefully they are working on fixing that. As usual, we just kind of go around and share information that, how we're doing within our own budgets from the members that are there. One committee, and I don't remember who it was now. I had my notes, but again, they're sitting on my desk at home, that had to go for an override, which did pass. One district is, like we are, going through their whole policy manual, which is, they're having as much fun as you all are, Linda. And then moving on to the legislative update, like Narissa had said before, we had discussed how, and that had happened the day before our meeting, how quickly the supplemental budget went through. Like, you blink and you missed it. Talked about the Special State Commission on Improving Public School Transportation Deficiencies, and I was proud to brag that our superintendent is a member of that commission, and so we'll have the inside scoop. And hopefully a little influence.
I'd like to think so.
Yes, I do too. And then the DESE update, we always do that too, just to go over the governor's goals. He had 9, or the commissioner's goals, excuse me. He has 9 goals. Some are the usual that you would expect. I think he's got a very ambitious agenda set for himself, but as we saw him at the conference, I think he's willing to make waves, and I'm hopeful that he is going to be true to his word and stand for education, which I'm not quite sure we always had in the past. Little editorial. We discussed the MCAS results and, how different districts had done, and, we were all commiserating about, 2.0 versus what had been happening in the past, and how do you compare apples to oranges and all of that. STEM Week was October 22nd to 26th, and Azabet actually had a whole program that they did. And then there was discussion on the blizzard bags. And there was a seminar on Saturday morning, which I was going to stay for, but did not, on blizzard bags. But that doesn't seem to be a very strong issue that's going to come forward for a variety of reasons. But the current thinking is, if by October 31st, if you had a blizzard bag policy or program in place, it needed to be submitted to DESE. If you approve one between now and then, or now and anytime after October 31st, so now, you need to submit it to them within a week of approving it. Did you want to say something to that?
I was just going to say, I heard from some school committee members who attended that and who walked out jazzed and ready to implement blizzard bags.
Really?
Which I was shocked by, because at least the discussions I've had with the Department of Ed, where blizzard bags present a real challenge with providing services for students who may not need, services that can't be provided through a computer, or having teachers online. And so the person I was discussing this with, debating, apparently the way it was presented, unveiled, they've found a workworkaround. I still don't believe it's a trade-off. It's not 6.5 hours of instruction. So, but it'll be interesting to see the way that plays out.
I'll be interested too, because quite honestly, at this committee meeting, we were talking about that, and one thing that, of course, being school committee members, we are concerned about the budget, and we're sitting here thinking, Why are we going to pay a teacher for 6.5 hours when they're not in front of the kids for 6.5 hours? These blizzard bags, it could take kids anywhere from 15 minutes to half hour, maybe, to complete some of these assignments. So I don't know. But as you said, it'll be something to look at.
Excuse me.
You know, if it does work, that's fine.
Also spoke to a school committee member that went there, and she says that it's least able to work in a regional district because some like in our issue, Salisbury didn't have lights, the other two did.
Right.
Right.
So with a lot of these, they all have the same community, so if the lights are out, everybody's out.
Yep.
But in a regional district, you have
true.
3 different towns, 4 different towns, however many towns that could possibly not have lights.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Another thing that we talked about was trying to pair up or partner with Support Mass Regional Schools, which Narissa and I are going to arrange time to sit down and decide how we can work together, because, you know, as we've said, this is going to affect all the regions. It's going to be a way for us to reach out to everybody in the state, and it's going to be able to access MASC resources, which right now regional schools doesn't have. And then you have our schedule of future meetings. So, and I've already talked to Jay Sullivan when he was at the conference to set up that meeting time in January. We usually talk to him afterwards, you know, once the budgets are out, and he can give us his take. So anyway, anybody have any questions?
Questions for Dina? All right. Moving on to the monthly report of the superintendent of schools.
I will
Trucking right along.
Trucking
right along.
That was good. I got that subliminal message. So a couple quick things in my schedule that I just want to quickly point out. The parking lot solar proposal review. Just so you know, that's a really preliminary concept of a company that would come in. They would rent the space, not putting solar on roof and these power purchase agreements. They literally rent the space and provide revenue. The question would be, would it be enough? I know Michelle's probably a big fan. Would it be enough revenue on a 20-year rental or lease to offset the cost of a bond to repave the entire parking lot? So that's a discussion ongoing. I have not committed to anything yet, just in
Brian,
case.
just one question. So what you're saying is putting canopies in the parking lot?
So it's parking canopies. So it's kind of, you've probably seen them at MBTA stations. The company I met with actually has 37 MBTA stations they're doing. So it goes right down the middle of the spaces, and they look like kind of like gull wings going down, provide shade, and it produces electricity, and they own everything. So we don't have any arrangement for the juice. It's just literally renting the space. So long way to go to see if that's even feasible, but just didn't want you to see that there and think that Brian's going off the deep end. The DPW director, just to share that we met with Lisa DeMayo. Jim Montanari, the principal at Salisbury, and I met with Lisa DeMayo, who's the DPW director for a couple of years now, to bring that Smart Routes, Safe Routes to School program. Because we transport everyone by bus, I thought it was a non-issue, but there's actually quite a bit of really cool community programming and bike safety events and things. So we're going to work on that, become a partner. And then just to note where I said the meeting with the Council on Aging directors, we're trying to get some information into this month's report, but in December, Julie Romano, who is our community resource liaison, is I could fill this whole packet more with everything she's done since she started. So be able to give you some good information on what she's been working on. A couple of the very quick items that are not listed here. This morning, I just to let you know, there was an alarm at Newbury Elementary that required the whole school to evacuate, brought them back into the gym. It was an extended period of time, which is unusual. But that was an alarm malfunction, so just to make sure you're aware of that. And then just to also let you know that for this campus, we have an annual inspection that the building inspector walks through with the fire chief, 5 or 6 other fire department staff, along with the building inspector. There's always a couple of little deficiencies here and there that are found. There was a pretty significant, we'll call it a significant list found this year. I don't know what to make of it yet, haven't done a lot of digging, but it's just a very large spike in the number of deficiencies found. So they are, I wouldn't say any of them look to be major.
They weren't alarming when I went
there. They were not alarming.
No,
so there are
things we need to address.
Yes. Crash bars on doors, ceiling tiles hanging in front of exit signs. So it's something that, Chris Walsh sees a facilities issue. He had a plan ready to go. We're going to get this taken care of. So just apparently there was some discussion about this report in the town of Newbury. So just to make that clear, we do have a report in hand. It is something that we feel we can very confidently address life safety issues in the matter of next couple days, and beyond that, long term, to fix those issues permanently.
But it should be noted that we received that report today.
We received that today.
Yes, so.
So we heard information.
We heard there was a report.
Yesterday. We received the report today. So until today, we didn't know what people were talking about.
Yes.
Now we do. So quickly to go through the report, just to note, lots of great ceremonies to honor veterans on both Friday and yesterday. Annual report, so you do have a copy of that. If you want to provide feedback, I've received that from several of you. The goal was to get it in the mail on Friday and post it online. Again, we're mailing a postcard to every household, and actually for an extra $200 to every business as well, so that we thought that was a well-spent $200. So that postcard will go to every address in Newbury, Byfield, Rowley, and Salisbury. Has a link has a picture of the report and a link to where the report is online. But the wrinkle is we're also printing several hundred copies so that we can put a handful in each council on aging, in each town hall, in each town library, in each school, in our office. If realtors, for example, decide they want a handful of them, to have a handful of those. So because the postcard says you can also find them in your town hall, we have to make sure that those are printed and in the town halls and in the libraries. So it kills me to not make deadlines. I know Patty's laughing because I had a little meltdown earlier. So it kills me to not make that deadline because we had said Friday the 15th. But so actually it'll be to the printer on Friday the 15th. Postcards will be ready to go, and everything will go in the mail into town halls and all those locations on Monday following Thanksgiving. I forgot that we have Thanksgiving stuck in the middle of that. So again, any thoughts, feedback, some suggestions folks made, kind of long-term things to edit for the future. This is certainly a first run-through on this. And I think every year, the hope is that it gets a little more readable. Some people had made suggestions, a table would be really good here rather than narrative. And I agree, a little late in the game to make those changes now, but I think that over the coming years, to make this report more and more usable and user-friendly, and to both celebrate everything we do well and paint the reality of the financial picture so that people are clear on the challenges that we face. Principal search process for the high school, you have that attached. You have a new printed copy on the table just because we didn't do a principal search in 2017, but I had 2017 in there for those first two items. So if there's any questions about that, I think it's a very thorough process. As I reviewed that with the process to get feedback with my cohort from other new superintendents, third-year superintendents, some thought, well, I just pick a person, and other, so I think this is a process that we've used before, adding in some opportunity for each of these candidates to come on site and actually do a kind of a meet and greet, one each night. We have runway, as I like to say, so we've got time now. So since we have the time, we're going to do it right. We're going to take the time. So basically, meeting with staff, faculty next week to lay this out for them, posted by December 1st. As of January 11th, start that whole screening process and be able to name someone by March 1st. So if you have any thoughts or comments, please don't hesitate to let me know. Pine Grove update, we're still trucking along. John and Abigail Adams scholarship winners, all 50 of those students who received that honor at a breakfast, was that just last week? Are listed there. Certainly an impressive accomplishment. The scholarship only applies if a student chooses to go to a state school, but regardless, it's an achievement for them to have scored in those categories on the MCAS. To acknowledge TEF, who organized a book donation from Scholastic. It was a big old box of books, two massive 2,000-pound boxes of books that just basically come unsorted. Literally, it's basically kind of extras and orders that they just put together. All high-quality books, but it then required Kim and literally box she could hide inside, massive boxes of books, and several others that just got together and sorted them out and ended up being quite a nice donation. So lots of great resources. Alice, to keep you alert that we are still continuing with the training. The final staff training is this coming Monday, bless you, the 19th. Following that training, we'll be then getting all of our trainers back together to kind of to assess next steps, to do those first drills with students. We will not do any drills with students until we have a community meeting with parents and set expectations about exactly what they can expect. Initial response, from what I've heard, is that it's nice to have, no one wants to talk about this, but it's nice to have some very clear and concrete discussions about the what-ifs. So more as we continue there. Snow removal contract, just to let you know, last winter, I don't remember the exact date. Chris Walsh knows it at the top of his head. We had an event here where it froze very quickly in the morning. Our contractor did not make it back. So thankfully, not too much made it to social media, but it was a very unsafe situation with literally this entire place was a sheet of ice. We had very serious conversations with our contractor, brought it back out for quotes, not formally bid, and lo and behold, the next cheapest would be about $40,000 more to change contractors. So we're getting an incredible deal. It's a local company. There's been a change in personnel. We've had a meeting with the owner, the brother, the person who's now in charge, a Triton grad, and I'm satisfied that this company will make sure that that never happens again. And so we have retained them as our snow removal contractor for the coming year.
Who is the company?
Shahovitz out of SLS Landscapes right here out of Raleigh. So they have, that we received offers the day of the event from parents who work for landscaping companies. So we took up all those offers and we reached out to them, and they knew here's what we're paying now and give us your best, and weren't able to come even close. So again, aside from that one event, we've had incredible service, and I'm satisfied, going out on a limb saying I'm satisfied saying that won't be repeated. And a quick little just blurb here about, I actually talked to the coach today, just a quick little blurb about the Triton football team. I don't know how many of you saw it, but it made it to Yahoo Sports, it made it to, you name it, national sports, about the fact that the Triton football team, who did not win any games, made it into the state tournament. It was incredibly, I've had some emails with the editor and Max Cerullo, and we respectfully disagree that there were some words chosen that it was not the kids' fault. They went out there every day and worked their tail off. And it is what it is. We've had the female golfer who wasn't able to give an award because of an archaic system by the MIAA. Clearly here, there's another fault in the formula. But it's not the coaches, it's not the students' fault. So they were awarded a game. Friends with the superintendent. I was going to put a wager and just offer to take her out to dinner. So they played it. They played it with gusto. It was a well fought game. The kids did a great job on both sides, and so it happened the way it should have happened. But the press that it got was a little bit unfair. So just to make sure you're aware of that, the way that played out.
I would say a little bit more than a little bit unfair.
So I would say yes. It depends. We'll quote unquote press. A lot of what was out there that in the name of the press was not the press. I think by and large, the Newburyport Daily News reported it, just the facts. There was some choice of a few words that I would have changed. But others that claimed themselves to be the press was just pure editorial and ridiculous.
One other thing to that?
Of course you can.
I think the way that the football team worked hard and didn't succumb to all of that negative outlook of them making, the tournament. Kudos to them.
Put their head down and get playing. That's their job. This is high school sports. This is about learning and growth. That's all.
I know.
I'm sorry, that was still you to stop talking. I'm done.
No, I just going forward quickly. I don't want, not tonight but not tonight. Could we have a little bit more information on either the agenda or highlights of the meetings that you have with the chairs and the Board of Selectmen?
Yes, we're actually covering that tomorrow night because I felt like it was best covered with the whole DCC before I brought it back here and then covered it.
Okay.
just because it involves everybody, I'm trying not to be selective towards our committee, if that makes sense. Yeah. But it's actually in Annex 2 for tomorrow's agenda. I know Paul has a question. Brian is done.
Question. So Brian, on the personnel, I see that there's 12 IAs that have been hired or appointed. Can you spell out what that all means?
People leave. So we've had, we just were talking about having to add to because of needs. I think Michelle alluded to in the personnel, what's the word? What's the word? The contingency.
Salary reserve.
The salary reserve. But that's all just strictly IAs leaving. That happens routinely.
So in the future, how are we going to know when we've brought a new IA in versus we brought in an IA to replace IA B who left? How are we going to know the difference?
I will take that away and see if we can't tweak that on the report so you can see
just
that.
Either put new hire
Yep.
or replace departing, because I think it's
Absolutely.
helpful for us to know that.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And the other question I had, Brian, about your interviewing process of the principal.
Yep.
You have until the last week when they meet with you to check references, and I just wonder why the interviewing committee early on that you're not part of, why they wouldn't do that legwork to check references early in the process, rather than presenting 3 people to you at the end and checking, and you would be checking references at that point.
So as a general reference, or as a general process, I should say, you check references on your finalists. So there's a legality of me going digging on someone and someone providing references, letters, and contact information. There's no way to check references on every single candidate. I think the first screening that I would do is pulling out, before we give it to committees of parents and community and faculty and staff and administrators, would be to pull people off that don't meet the qualifications. So there's likely going to be people that are paper screened right out. And then I think it's important at that part where we're, that convening of that interview committee in January, where we're taking the information from those surveys, here's what the community is looking for, here's what students are looking for, and kind of setting the vision for the principal. I have to make it very clear about, so if this is my appointment, here's my no-fly zone. This person has to hit these 3 things. Beyond that, let's have that discussion. But I think that it's to check references early on. It would either be checking all of them or checking none of them. And so to do all of them, I expect that with this process we'll get 50, 55, 60 candidates. So until you have someone where you're saying to that reference, I've got this person, they're a finalist. They're 1 of 2, they're 1 of 3, they're 1 of 4. That's when you get the real helpful discussions, I would say.
Okay.
I would say, I could get myself in quite a bit of trouble by just going and selectively finding my own information. It happens, of course. You check every candidate for Facebook. But seeking out real references to talk to people unsolicited can come back to bite you. Yeah.
Any other questions on the superintendent's report?
I just have one comment.
Dina?
I noticed in the school council meetings minutes for Salisbury, the meeting they had on November 1st, there were only 2 people.
Yes, so we're at the middle school, and I was talking to Al the other day saying, you know what, just schedule the meeting because it's the same thing. There's not been a, I forget the Salisbury, there was something, it was during camp or there was something, and so they decided to hold the meeting. They scheduled it, they held it, but I think the same thing was happening at the middle school where they haven't scheduled one because they can't get the parents and community reps to agree a date. But there aren't massive numbers of people coming forward for school councils. It's been a challenge.
We need to come up with some way to encourage people to get involved with that, because 2 people is not representative of a school council.
And I was just thinking, Julie Romano is also trying to seek out more parents to get involved in the middle school PTA and that high school PTA, because at our last meeting we mentioned that is a need as well as the council is a need too. So, and she's a really strong person to get, and I.
Shy.
Yep. Nope.
Great. Yeah.
So.
And I think that as we're talking about advocacy, and there's more folks coming forward to run for school committee, I mean, I think this is the time to say, here's another way you can get involved. Absolutely, I agree.
And we're going to set up table, just because I'm excited about this, but we're going to set up a table during the parent conferences at the middle school with like a big banner and a sign and balloons to get people to come over to find out what's involved, what's the time commitment, because I think some people might shy away because they don't understand what it's all about. So giving that opportunity, that place that they can ask questions. So hopefully we'll have some more people on board with that.
I can understand that in the middle school. I guess I was just drawn to this because it was Salisbury Elementary, and they usually have much more than 2 people
They do,
attend.
absolutely.
So just
Yeah, they normally, that was an anomaly for them. They do have a full school council currently.
Any other comments, questions? All right, moving on to the fiscal year 19 operating budget, revised operating budget. Michelle, I assume? Seeing this?
Don't want to spend too much time on it, but there are, in the FY19 revised or adjusted budget booklet, just want to point out a few things. This document encompasses all changes that have occurred to our budget since March 14th of 2018. So as most of you have lived through it, we had a significant amount of budget cuts that we had to make in May, totaling $664,396. The detail of those cuts can be found on page 3, the first half of page 3. And some of those encompassed increased revenue assumptions, and some of them were actual budget cuts. So those totaled the $664,396. Since that budget, that $664,000 that was cut in May but was never put into a formal document, we also had some reallocations, I should say. There was one change. Our Chapter 70 revenue came in lower than anticipated. So we have a shortfall of $35,960. So we decreased our budget by this amount. Because we know we are not going to receive those funds. So we decreased our budget by that amount, and then the rest were all reallocations, and you can see all of those on the bottom half of page 3. And basically they net to zero because we are offsetting them from other lines within our budget. Primarily, it is just a reallocation of some of the column movements the teachers had submitted for and IAs had submitted for the previous year, the salary reserve for the non-union COLAs, those types of things, and just movement within our payroll accounts. There are a few other things within there, but they do net to zero. So if you turn to the next page, page 4, which is our assessment sheet, this gets a little confusing because it does encompass all of the changes since March. The assessments to the member communities did not change whatsoever. The assessments remain the same. However, on that sheet in the middle of that page, the box says operating assessment in the yellow. The smaller box, it does reflect the decrease of the $664,396. So their assessments did go down back in May and June, did not go down right now. So the amounts that we certified to them in June remain the same. There were no changes with the capital budget, as those numbers were fixed. And just wanted to point out page 10, which is what we call our logical summary. It categorizes all of our expenditures by category, whether it be administration, instructional, support, technology, and this is where you will actually see the decrease of the $525,356, which is the amount of the expenditure reductions if you net out the revenue, the net revenue change. So this is what our budget went down during that May timeframe. And then that was about it. So those were voted back in May. So we do not need to do anything about voting that, but the budget is now reallocated to our actual needs as of a couple weeks ago. So any budget transfers at this point do go through the superintendent. They aren't significant, and anything that would be significant we definitely bring to the committee's attention.
Questions or comments? Yes. Paul?
So I just, on page 3, at the bottom box, where it says TRTA column movement the second time, and there's a $128,000 figure there. What exactly does that mean?
Okay. That was the amount of money that we had to reallocate to the salary lines. The teachers and IAs submitted for anticipated movement on the scale from one column to another, and we did not put that into their salary line items. It's whether they went from a bachelor's to a master's to a CAGS, and the IAs are based on professional development hours. So they made column movement, and it cost us $128,000 last year. So we took it out of this one reserve account and we allocated it to the various payroll accounts.
So
The first time, the $35,000, when you see it the first time, that is actually the offset to the Chapter 70 decrease, because we had estimated more in the column movement line than we actually needed, because so many people had submitted saying, I'm going to make this column movement, and certain people did not. So we had about $40,000 excess in that line.
So, Michelle, my question is that $128,177 figure.
Yep.
How do you chalk that up to the one-page document that we looked at before? That has a $50,000 allowance for column movement. Is it really a function that there's only this year so many people that are eligible for a column movement? Is that really what?
This year was the first year for IAs. They had never been previously able to do this. And the teachers were unusually high. We had about 10 teachers moving from a master's to a CAG, so they were jumping multiple columns. So it was actually an anomaly. Thank you. I always stumble with that word. Yes, it was an anomaly this year, and typically we see it in the $50,000 to $60,000 range. So we're hoping it goes back there.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the revised fiscal year 19 operating budget as recommended by the Finance Subcommittee, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? All right, moving on to subcommittee reports and action items, please. Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee. Linda, if you would start us off.
Yes. The policy where we've finished reviewing with MASC, and now we're going back through the policies. We looked at A through F. What's that?
A through F is done-ish, and then G through L will get a final.
So in the coming months, you'll be getting the whole policy manual to review yourself. It's very exciting. And on the advocacy side of it, I had gone to the Council on Aging, and Julie Romano has been doing an amazing job being our liaison. So as Brian said, she's going to bring different activities that they're going to be doing with the schools and with our Council on Aging. We at our advocacy meeting had discussed different ways that we could acknowledge some of the great things that our students are doing in the schools. We have some of the students that Narissa spoke about at the beginning. What we as a subcommittee have wanted to ask is that we want the school committee to start recognizing some of the students and some of the great work they do by coming up with a nomination form for teachers to nominate students and having us present them with certificates from the school committee to acknowledge the great work and things that they're doing in our community, in our schools, what they're doing academically, and things like that. I don't know if anybody else in the committee would like to add to it.
I think Linda had a great idea in terms of recognizing that. And we also thought that it would be another way to connect more students, and we even talked about sort of like a volunteer of the month. Narissa had a good example of someone that works within the schools, but it's not actually an employee. So to connect those people with the school committee and show that the school committee is actually know all the good things, we know what's going on, and you know, those students and those parents might have no idea we're here or what we do. So, and if they get that certificate, especially for the students, that's great for them to put on a college application. I mean, we're talking about the entire district, not just high school, but I think it was a great idea brought up by Linda. We were looking for feedback in terms of having Brian potentially develop the form, the nomination form that teacher would fill out, or anyone really. Like if you knew someone that volunteered, you know, we could nominate that, and then it would just be a snowball effect. It'd be a really positive thing.
And just to build on it every year, volunteer of the month, teacher of the month, or teacher of the year, we can grow this into anything that we want to grow it into. We want people to know what the school committee does, not just the budget. Do you have anything, Brian?
I just have a comment on that. I just think it's important if you do that, that you represent, you know, the SPED community and, you know, the athletic community, because sometimes when you give out an award to represent the school committee or the superintendent, sometimes I think some communities don't feel that it's representative of who you truly serve. And so I think it's really critical to make sure that, you know, there's a proportion of SPED versus regular ed versus athletic, et cetera, et cetera. That's all.
Well said. Yeah.
Any other questions on that? I just want to, it was 2 years ago, I think, that we added advocacy to the policy subcommittee. Was it last year? 2 years ago? Last year? You guys have come a long way. You've done some phenomenal work in a year's time. I mean, you know, when I think about where we were versus where we are now, thumbs up for you guys. Personnel and Negotiation Subcommittee, please. Dina?
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry, Linda.
Do we need to vote to?
I don't think so.
Well, I just wanted to see if the rest of the committee agreed with the nomination form.
Okay. I don't know. I would take feedback. I don't think we need an official vote to move forward on that.
If we were going to vote on that, I'd like to see what the form looked like and get more
I just
information.
wanted to give Brian the charge of putting together that, if that's okay with the committee.
Add it to the list.
Bring that with Narissa, and then we can bring it back to the next month and
Unequivocally.
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 You haven't said it at all.
All right, Dina.
Okay, for PNN, you have a very large bundle of job descriptions in your packet that we went back after last month's meeting and made some of the edits. Actually, Narissa was the only one that offered any edits. And hopefully these are done, and we will be voting to approve these. And we, in our last meeting too, we did, besides doing this, we went into executive session to start discussing strategy for PEC, which we will be meeting November 28th. So it's coming up.
Any questions or comments for Dina? Can I get a motion to approve the updated job descriptions as a second and final reading, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? All right, unanimous.
Thank you.
I'll move on to Finance Subcommittee, and we are going to pull back up the Moody's Investors Service Credit Opinion, which is Annex 6. Page 27, thank you. Sorry, and Deb, turning it over to you.
I guess I don't have any. We had our meeting, and you have all the regular monthly documents in your packet, the treasurer's report, revolving accounts report, et cetera. And those were approved as part of the
Consent agenda.
Consent agenda, thank you. So Dina asked that the Moody's statement be pulled, so I'm assuming Dina has questions for Michelle.
Thank you.
Some questions, some comments. I just thought that this should have been pulled out. This is an important piece of financial information. I'd like to ask Michelle to kind of give us just a very brief overview of what this actually means for our rating.
Yes. Moody's had contacted us to perform an annual evaluation on our bond rating. Previously, we were, what was it?
Got moved to a double
A1. Okay. Previously, we were at a double A3 with a negative outlook. This is still in the A category. It's not a bad bond rating. However, it is not, we do not like to see the negative outlook, nor do we like to see being decreased. So they really dive into your financials. They go, believe it or not, through an hour-long phone call and a lot of information that we need to give them. They extract a lot of information. And basically, because we do not have reserves or the ability to maintain reserves, the only reserve we have the ability to maintain is excess and deficiency, or what communities call free cash. And we do not have a lot of that. The bond rating has been decreased. So they decreased us to to an A1 with also a negative outlook, which means that they do not expect us to turn it around. They did note that we did have some positive aspects that, we have a pretty significant estimated E&D figure for this year. It's not huge, but it's a figure. And they do acknowledge that we are in decent shape, but the fact that we don't have reserves and don't have the ability for the reserves really hurt us. So at this point, we are not going out for any bonding of any projects. So really, this has no impact on us at this point. But if we were to, say, do a renovation of some sort that wasn't one of our member communities' renovations, it would hurt us. A little bit, not a lot. It would give us a higher interest rate, basically. But it's not significant, as we are still in the A ranges. But they really felt strongly about that reserve issue. And if you want to add anything.
I think it's important to note in the report that it lists that Newbury and Rowley are double A2s, and Salisbury is a double A3. So it starts with triple A, that's prime, that's perfect. Then you go double A1, double A2, double A3, and that's considered a high grade. And then we just slipped into A1, which is the top of the upper medium grade. So Salisbury has a rating 1 higher than us. Newbury and Rowley a rating now 2 higher than us. So I think it's an important thing. I agree. I think this is an important thing to pull out and have a discussion about and say, here's the scoop. There's a real effect to us not having reserves, to us not having E&D, to us not having set up what we said we can, set up a regional transportation stabilization or a general stabilization or a special education stabilization. We haven't been able to do that because of the, we say because of the funding available in the towns, but it's also the towns are strapped. Because of the way the state has been funding our budget, we haven't had the resources. So we're going to start seeing the negative impact on that.
And I think that this is important to bring to the DCC tomorrow night. I know that this is not on the agenda for tomorrow night, but I would like to see copies of this brought for everybody tomorrow night, because I do think that that's the area that we need to have the conversation. It's one thing for all of us to know, and I'm sure the town officials know, but the more we talk about it, the more we can maybe work together to affect the state so we take some of the burden off the towns. I agree that's where it lies, but I was not happy. Put it that way.
Is this an annual rating? Every year we get a new rating? How often?
As I say, I thought it was 2 years ago when we went out to bond for the stadium. Was that, maybe that was 3 years ago now? No, I was here for the bonding of the stadium, so, yeah. So it's been a little less than 3 years the last time we got it. So I believe it was actually about 2 years ago we did it last.
So we request it, or is it automatic?
No, it's automatic. And there are two different main rating agencies. There's Moody's and there's Standard & Poor's. So Standard & Poor's is a little bit more flexible, usually a little bit higher. But so if we were going out for a project, we'd seek both of the bond ratings.
I'm just thinking strategically in terms of if we think in 10 years we're going to need to go out to bid for something, we can.
Exactly.
Like pulling credit if you're going for a pre-approval to be aware of it, to try to build that up.
Well, that's it. And dipping into our E&D every year routinely, that hurts the rating as well. So the fact that we have to dip into the reserves to close the budget gap every year.
If we could just get a report that kept us at A1 with a positive outlook, we'd be in good shape, because then that's they're starting to see the things that would lead them to jump it back up or bump it back up.
But is the biggest factor the E&D cushion that's downgrading us?
The fact that we're dipping it into it every year and we're not able to maintain that consistently.
That we have less than the,
Way less.
yes,
Yes.
way less than the
Maximum.
Pounds?
recommended
Oh, the-
amount that the state had, between 3 and 5%. We haven't been anywhere close to 3%.
We got
In
close-
15 years.
That is actually in the annual report, that information.
We've never gone anywhere near 5. We got into the 2s at one point.
Yes, we did.
I remember it.
Paul?
So, Michelle, I just want to drill down on this report just a little bit. I know it's not your report, but there's a short paragraph in here I just can't get my arms around, and it's on page 3 of this report. At the very bottom, the second to the last paragraph, it says the district contributed 23.9% of its annual OPEB cost in 2017, representing $1.6 million. I don't understand that. What are they based that on? The district contributed 23.9 of its annual OPEB cost in 2017, representing 1.6 million.
That must include our retirement assessments,
Okay.
the Essex County retirement and the Mass Teachers contribution.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you know what the OPEB liability is,
Yeah.
right? That's the
Other
potential
posts and
other,
benefits.
the complete. if-
67.6 million.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
If everyone in this district that's currently employed has benefits until death, that's what the total cost is. So that 1.6 million is similar to, I think, in the audited financials, where you have the gap analysis on an accrual basis, where they're attributing payments. So everything we're paying today, what do you call it, pay as you go, is what's counted as part of that 1.6 million. So that included all the benefits of the current employees.
Actual money going out.
The actual amount we paid to Blue Cross.
It's not
Dental.
anything we've set aside.
We did not set aside 1.6 million, yes.
We have only set aside $10,000 to date. Yes.
Still looking.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right.
Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 28th at 1 o'clock.
Thank you. Moving on to correspondence, you'll see our superintendent has an acknowledgement here from the Senate Minority Leader to the governor, noting that his appointment of the superintendent to the whatever the official name of this thing is now, the yes, Commission to Improve Efficiencies Relative to Transportation. And also a congratulations from the auditor, handwritten, on his appointment to said commission as well. And with that,
Brian.
with that, can I please have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
So moved.
All right. I need discussion. All in favor? All right. We are officially adjourned. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Hi, Deb. It was moving.
Tina,
Yes.
I thought you were lying. I just asked Kim. She's like, oh, yeah.
I know.
Yeah, and literally, he liked that.
Anybody interested?